There we go.
In American history,
Thanks to
Eomni from KTUH, he 1,000 gallons, and that's terrible. Going, you might have heard about recently, and not because of the leak. You've heard about probably the pipeline because you've been listening to her. So we thought, since we're going this way, we'd stop and see if we could find out what the folks in Huntersville how they felt about this second largest fuel spill in American history.
and take our mobile kit for a test drive.
Right. So far, we found one person that has heard of it. To a guy advising me on all kinds of different places to get beer. And then when we asked him if he lived here, he said yes. And we asked him about how he felt about the pipeline leak. And he said, "What leak?"
What leak?
And he lived a couple of miles from there. So, and this leak apparently is just a few miles from where we were talking to him. So we're driving to, it's a nature preserve is where the that I've seen did not know that there was a pipeline running through their neighborhoods. So this looks like something here. There's a lot of flags. Maybe we can pull over here for a second. You can flip around.
Yeah, we're looking.
So this is
us being pulled over. Probably warning: petroleum pipeline.
Oh.
Excavation.
So all those. So that's where the pipeline is, apparently. The story is that they've dug 200 some odd wells to try to pump the pumping the product out of the ground.
Yes, out of the what do they call it? The dislocated product area?
Free. Yeah, the free product. So the product has been freed from the pipeline, and now they're wrangling it back in. And then I saw a report saying that they'd recovered over 1 million of the 1.2 underestimate gallons. They said they've recovered of the product, and another report was it was 1.2 million gallons of product adjacent
Oh, this
water.
guy's coming over.
Oh yeah.
You want to talk about?
Yeah.
Private property.
Private property. Okay. We were looking for the nature preserve.
This is a nature preserve, but it's closed to public.
Oh, it's closed. For how long? Do you know?
No, don't.
Okay. Well, all right. Sorry to step on your toes.
Oh, you are. You
All
just
right.
can't let nobody be here. See the sign right there?
Which? Oh, that sign?
Yes.
No, oh, closed to the public. I see. Is this where you would normally enter the park?
I don't know. I don't live there.
Oh, okay. So you don't know if there's another entrance?
No, sir. I know this whole section is closed. I do know that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Yes, sir.
I'll pull out.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm just sort of trained to be terrified of getting in trouble, I guess. I didn't ever think that I was trained to be terrified of getting in trouble.
Oh, I just play stupid. That's disarming.
We have a camera.
Yeah. Anyway, so he doesn't know where the park is. It's private property, even though.
Oh, wait. But we were like, this is where the nature preserve is. And he
Yes.
was like,
And it's private property now.
well, it is technically now private property because Colonial Pipeline bought up
the nature preserve.
all the property. Did they buy the nature preserve too? I thought they just bought all the properties.
Well, these are not cheap houses that we're passing by, so they spent some money. I mean, look at J.P. Orleans and the Walden. They have very nice entryways and gates to their communities. So when they say they bought up properties around the leak, these are not shacks.
Right.
And yet somehow folks in town don't seem to know that this has happened.
I really thought, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the Oler Nature Preserve doesn't exist anymore
Maybe it doesn't exist anymore.
for humans to go to. Humans like us.
Well, that was a donated property from what I read. Somebody donated the land so that we could have a nature preserve. And now there's a pipeline. There's been a pipeline through it since the 70s.
Oh.
And I don't know what came first. Yeah, so some
Pipeline.
of the Uller Nature Preserve,
Right.
which is now the Uller Pipeline.
Which is now private property because it's owned by Colonial Pipeline, I'm guessing.
Well, I think it's always been leased or owned or something. Anyway, the story gets weirder and weirder.
That guy's not from around here.
He's not from around here. He can't tell us anything.
Huh. Not as anonymous as I am.
Right. Well, because his belly button was right up in my face.
That made it so
Even
that
better?
he couldn't see the camera.
Yeah, I know. It was really good.
Yeah. Wow,
Well-
this is nerve-wracking. Investigative journalism.
So
Scary times.
we could have been, I guess, more investigative, but fine, corral.
Right.
So-
Displaced product area.
So I'm not a. When you hear Colonial Pipeline, everybody thinks of hack.
Nowadays.
Now, I haven't been able to hear anybody who thinks of second largest fuel leak in the history of the country,
Right.
which oddly just happened
In August.
In August.
Less than a year ago.
And the stories, I didn't see any big stories coming out aside from local news, which, like I said, only reported up until about 63,000 gallon leak. They stopped reporting when they got into the over 1 million
Right.
or several 100,000. So the last we heard about the pipeline, news of the pipeline and the leak, is that the Department of Environmental Quality here in North Carolina said that they are in violation. Colonial Pipeline is in violation of keeping people abreast of the situation. They said we need to know new estimates, and from what I read in the article, the Department of Environmental Quality got a verbal confirmation from the Colonial Pipeline that the 1.2 million gallons was
An underestimate.
an underestimate
And that the product traveled deeper
than
than
they
they
estimated,
originally thought.
and that all their modeling was no longer any good.
Which modeling is the map based on information and data of where the pipeline probably leaked.
So sometime in April, they decided that their modeling was no good, and
The numbers are no good.
and they are now in violation of not keeping people up to date.
Right.
And we've heard nothing of new modeling.
So if I were to put that in common parlance,
Say it in common parlance.
Colonial Pipeline doesn't know how much gasoline has leaked and also doesn't know where it is.
So yeah, doesn't know where it is or how much leaked. And so
Because when you say our models are no longer valid and it is deeper than we thought and 1.2 million gallons is an underestimate, that's basically saying
we don't know what happened.
we don't know how much has leaked and we don't know where it is, which makes it awfully hard to go get it.
And they also don't know how long it was leaking.
They don't know how long it was leaking. They did say that a plane flying over the pipeline route the week before the ATV boys found the leak did not detect any leaks. However,
Plane?
Yes,
Okay.
they were doing a check. A
Oh.
plane flying over the pipeline route was doing a check.
right.
However, I think that's probably because, having done some research on the Colonial Pipeline and discovered that it is an underground pipeline,
Yeah.
that the plane would not have known
Well,
if there was a leak.
I imagine if
unless it was going like,
I guess everything could die around the leak
potentially.
because gasoline.
Right. But what if the leak was on the underside of the pipe and was just sort of going down into the water table? Because
Which
the
apparently
boys,
some of that has been happening.
yeah, the boys basically showed up and
Smelled it.
were like, this smells, what they said was, it smelled more like gasoline than it should have around the pipeline.
Right. Do we want to take the freeway?
I don't know, maybe we should stop. Stop.
So I'll do it. I'll stop, and then we'll just try to wrap this up.
Yeah, because I don't think I can look at my GPS while we're live
Right.
streaming.
So as I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do like to analyze, and I did see a Washington Post article on the story of the Colonial Pipeline hack. And in the story, they said there were baseless accusations that the hack might be might have been covering up.
Oh yes, they
leak.
said completely false allegations.
Completely false allegations that
like,
the story of the hack was a cover-up for this leak.
But how do you know?
So, the leak happened in August, just to recap. The numbers have been going up, and the 1.2 million was the last thing I heard sometime in April. And then when they said, yeah, it's bigger than that, and at the time it was the second biggest leak in the country. So they're saying it's bigger than that, and before any other information can come out saying how big it is, suddenly the Colonial pipeline is back in the news with a hack.
Well, it's now in the news.
Yes.
For the first time.
The pipeline is back in the news, but for a different story.
Right.
And so...
But it wasn't really in the news.
That's true.
Like there was, there was one Fox News article that I could find, and then WCNC TV station was covering it for North Carolina.
Right.
But it was, I haven't seen any national news sources talking about the spill.
No, I think there was an independent article, a couple of independent journalist articles have been talking about it. So I find it interesting that when they said the 1.2 million, which is a massive number, when they said that wasn't quite it, they stopped talking about numbers and now started talking about Russians and a computer hack.
Mm-hmm.
And they've given no new information on how big the extent of the spill was. And my final thought on that is they only found the leak because 2 kids found it on their ATVs. This is one of the largest pipelines in the country. It's also a very old pipeline from, I believe, 1977. So it doesn't have the controls on it that can let you know if there's a leak. So that's one leak that was found by 2 boys on an ATV, and that pipeline runs from Texas to
New York City.
So I imagine that it's possible that might not be the only leak.
It's quite possible.
Anyway, something to think about and chew on. We got an email address for the city council to see if they can keep us up to date on
we joined a local Facebook group for Huntersville, and they recommended that we email all the city, the 8 chamber members or something, the 7
chamber
council,
and
that someone would email us back. And I'm sure it's in the city's best interests to keep a light on the story because it's affecting the citizens here. Whether or not,
or it might be bad for tourism. I don't know.
Oh, I want to think it's in the city's best interest.
I do too.
All right.
But I don't.
But we're not necessarily sure. Okay, well that was an adventure.
All right, end of this story. Stay tuned for more details later.
See you guys.